When I look back at that particular weekend, I realize how something so ordinary can suddenly become extraordinary, and how the words of someone you never expected can shift the entire course of your life. It all started when my cousin Ethan called and asked if his best friend, Daniel, could stay at my place for a weekend. Ethan was flying out on a business trip and didn't want Daniel to feel stranded in town. I wasn't too thrilled about having a guest I barely knew in my home, but Ethan insisted that Daniel was a great guy, polite, respectful, and easy to get along with. Against my usual instincts of keeping my home private, I agreed. At the time, I was 32, living in a small town in Oregon, where life felt predictable and calm, but also a little lonely. I had gone through a tough breakup about a year earlier, one that left me wary of letting anyone new in. My house was warm, filled with plants and books, a reflection of how I tried to make peace with solitude. I didn't expect anything different to happen when Daniel walked into my life that Friday afternoon, carrying just a duffel bag and wearing a smile that seemed to carry both nervousness and charm. When I opened the door, Daniel greeted me warmly. "Hi, you must be Claire. Thanks for letting me crash here. I promise I won't be any trouble." I laughed softly. "Well, Ethan says you're harmless, so I'm trusting his judgment. Come in." He stepped inside, looking around as though trying not to seem too curious. Daniel was tall, with sandy brown hair and a kind of quiet confidence in his posture. I noticed he was the type of person who listened first before speaking, which was rare these days. I showed him to the guest room, freshly made with crisp sheets, and told him to make himself at home. The first night was simple. We shared dinner, grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, and talked about little things. He told me about growing up in Chicago, his passion for photography, and how he was considering leaving his corporate job to pursue something more meaningful. I told him about my work as a teacher, my love for literature, and how I found joy in gardening. The evening passed easily, and I felt strangely comfortable around him, more than I expected to with someone I'd just met. The next morning, I woke up early to the sound of soft guitar strumming. Curious, I walked downstairs and found Daniel sitting on the porch with an old guitar I kept tucked away for guests. He was playing quietly, almost absent-mindedly, as if the music was just an extension of his thoughts. When he noticed me, he stopped abruptly and looked a little embarrassed. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said. "You didn't," I replied. "That was beautiful. I didn't know you played." He smiled shyly. "It's something I've always done. Music keeps me grounded." That moment felt intimate in a way I couldn't describe. I sat with him on the porch, the morning air cool and fresh, and we talked about dreams, the kind we don't usually admit to others. I confessed how I once dreamed of traveling the world, writing stories from the places I visited, but I stayed rooted out of fear and responsibility. He admitted how suffocating his job had become, how he felt like he was living someone else's life. Our conversation was raw, vulnerable, and real, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't with anyone in years. By Saturday evening, it was as though Daniel and I had known each other much longer than just a day. We cooked together, laughed at silly jokes, and shared stories from our pasts. Yet, beneath the comfort, I could feel something shifting inside me. I hadn't let myself connect with anyone since my breakup, and here I was, sharing parts of myself with a man I barely knew but felt inexplicably drawn to. That night, we sat by the fireplace with mugs of tea. The flames flickered shadows across the room, and the silence between us was calm, not awkward. Then Daniel spoke, his voice steady but soft, as if choosing every word carefully. "Claire, I know this might sound strange since I'm only here for the weekend, but I need to say this. You remind me of something I thought I lost: hope. Being around you, listening to you, it makes me realize I've been living half a life. I don't want to waste any more time being afraid of change." I froze, taken aback by his honesty. "Daniel," I began, unsure of what to say. He continued, his eyes meeting mine with sincerity. "I know we barely know each other, but sometimes you meet people who shake you awake. You've done that for me. And I had to tell you." His words hit me deeply. For so long, I had carried this fear of being vulnerable, of risking my heart again. Hearing him speak like that, so genuine and open, felt like a mirror being held up to my own soul. I realized I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of myself, of what it meant to want something more than the safety of my solitude. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at the fire, feeling its warmth against my face, and finally whispered, "You've shaken me awake too." The rest of the evening passed in quiet closeness. There were no dramatic declarations, No rushed actions, just an unspoken understanding that something had shifted between us. We stayed up late, talking until our words drifted into comfortable silence, the kind that feels like trust. Sunday came too quickly. Daniel had to leave by afternoon, and the thought of the house being quiet again felt heavier than usual. As he packed his bag, I felt a pang of sadness I hadn't expected. Before he left, he stood at the door, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Claire," he said softly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I don't want this weekend to be the last time I see you. You've changed the way I see my life. I want to keep this connection alive if you'll let me." I looked at him, my heart pounding. For the first time in years, I felt ready to take a chance. "Then let's not let it end here," I replied. He smiled, that same warm smile from when we first met, but now it carried something deeper, promise. Over the weeks that followed, Daniel and I stayed in touch. Phone calls turned into visits, and visits slowly turned into something more. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but rather a steady, grounding connection that grew with time. The words he said that weekend stayed with me, reminding me that sometimes life gives us exactly what we need when we least expect it. And now, as I tell this story, I realize that letting him stay for the weekend didn't just give me company. It gave me a second chance at love, at hope, and at trusting that the right words at the right time can truly change you forever.